Oh, welcome, welcome, welcome. Here once more in a reflection of A Course in Miracles, and as we were just coming from a wonderful experience of resurrection, having celebrated Easter and the Christ's resurrection within ourselves, and therefore also the resurrection of everyone in our mind, since Christ is one. We might look today in that context what the lesson is actually offering us when we are considering a daily lesson starting in the beginning of the year, and you're finding yourself with those lessons. I'm on the lesson 105, and already in yesterday's lesson, I seek but what belongs to me in truth. We are given here ideas that clarify for us what giving, receiving is all about. And this is what we want to offer ourselves, of course, because there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding that has been taught or sneaked into the consciousness as something completely normal, but was not less than a bargaining mode. And I'm so grateful to give here space in my mind, in my consciousness, to a teaching from out of time, a teaching as A Course in Miracles represents of resurrected Christ mind that teaches me and directs me and shows me what true giving actually is, and how that change in mind occurs when that human mind leaves that bargaining mode, as I call it, and really arrives at the full extension of giving the thought of light, giving creative thought, extending creative thought without limits. And as we were given in lesson 104, I seek but what belongs to me in truth. As we were going along in that practice, we could already tell that we are here introduced to the clarity that we are talking about God's gifts that are given us and that we are asked to give now. And that these gifts of God are joy and peace within his mind as within the mind of the Son. And so in my mind, there's joy and peace as it is in your mind. What we are doing here is just to remove the obstacles that we set in front of a full awareness of it. The obstacles that allowed us still to justify our relationship with ourselves in limited forms of gifts. And what we are doing now is literally to open that up to the full recognition what the entire gift of God is, because that is what we are here, and as it was expressed in lesson 104, that is what is our inheritance. And so to know that the joy and peace, and in today's lesson, in lesson 105, it just turns it around and mentions the peace first and defines it clearly that this is God's peace. God's peace and joy are mine, are yours. And as I already said, that we we don't want to give or offer each other gifts anymore that are just bargains and just offer a limited version of our true recognition of each other, our true experience that we can have with each other. And many times, or for many, that will still happen for a moment, especially in coming together, especially in celebrations, holidays, and then the human condition just comes forth and presents itself with all its aspects. And at that point, we know that this is not about somebody losing so that somebody can gain. This is really must be a win-win situation where uh, you and your brother to realize what has been given is an eternal gift and cannot be limited in any way. And this is part of the revelation of awakening when we get that right in our mind, right? When this is seen in right-mindedness, and where the limitation or the limit is seen immediately and opened up to limitlessness. And so the same is wherever a bargain demonstrates a certain type of dependency, a certain expression of the guilt within the human consciousness, and it's clearly insufficient when we look at how we want to relate in truth with our true self, from also, of course, from man to man. And we are getting here prepared in a few days, right? We arrive at lesson 108, in which we are told and taught that giving and receiving are one in truth. And so we are here to have a first glimpse of you, more into the depths of what giving means, and in the context, so that we can allow to receive it and then realize that what we have received is the only thing that we truly can give. And he mentions in the lesson itself that giving has become a source of fear. And if you look at that perspective, you will find, of course, within the human experience, many examples to that. Because when giving has become a source of fear, so you would avoid the only means by which you can receive, right? That was what was the idea behind it. It was, of course, also that the first thought was maybe just, if I'm gonna give away what I believe I have, even as a human being, then I might suffer loss. And there sneaked the idea of sacrifice into the consciousness, and giving was connected with sacrificing something that we liked, or we would want to have it as ours. And if it would be given away, it would not be available or in this position anymore. And now in our awakening, we come to know that this is not so, that what the fact of the matter is that those gifts indeed increase in ourselves. And this is good news. And so, of course, we're learning then later on, like in the lesson 159, that we give the miracles that we receive. Or I'm entrusted with the gifts of God, 166. And in the lesson 187, we hear then that in that lesson, I bless the world because I bless myself. You see, there's already an action of giving right there. we are clearly shown that giving is the proof of having, and having is in truth always to be, being. So giving is the proof of being with Him and having the gifts of God. And no one can give unless he has. That is also a premise that we always have to remember, that the moment I share with you the light and the love of God, I can only do that in an experience of a holy instant, and therefore an experience that we are literally in that moment resurrecting and going home, is because it is already what I am, and therefore it must be what you are also. And there is in that lesson 187 also this sentence, which you might remember as if you have studied this course already, or not just maybe once, but for many, many years. Protect all things you value by the act of giving it away, of giving them away. I protect all things I value, and all things I value is in the refinement of our conversion of our mind. This what we are talking about: the gifts of God, the joy, the peace, the love, the happiness, and to protect all things that have value. And of course, that is also uh, applicable to ideas that still take form and manifestation. If you want to really protect the thing that you value as having it yours, you will need to give it away. The instruction is you give it away by the act of giving it away. And therefore, through that action, you are sure that you will never lose them. That's a certainty that is offered us and given us and promised us. And you don't need to believe me by saying that. Just have your own experience of it. Just give it a try. Just experiment with that. And things that you like and love, and you share them. The moment you share them, the moment you give it away, the moment you let your brother be part of that without a need of a bargain, of needing to get anything um, back and in exchange, you will see how those gifts in your consciousness start to increase, and how joyful it makes you to simply give. And that is another premise that Jesus will always put out in teaching us the lessons or the perspectives of giving and receiving: to give with our whole heart, wholeheartedly, to give gladly, to give with that thought of giving literally the light of heaven. And the reason why we are trained to do that is because we only give to ourselves. I only give to myself. You only give to yourself. So all together in that whole, I mentioned it at the very beginning, what we are waking up and learning is that we never want to believe that we can sacrifice by giving, using giving or an extension and sharing, and in a sacrificial manner, will of course the ego use, and maybe a voice will talk, then what loss that you had if, or you would have if you would do that. And therefore giving, if it is done, then becomes a sacrificial act. And you can the innumerous examples, you can look into your world, how it would also look like if we would all be on that consciousness level, where we would just give gladly and take care of each other, and where everyone who, even in the material world, who has, would look at to those who do not have or who seek to have, and would share their riches or their knowledge or whatever they think they have. That is also an idea within the human consciousness, how to bring that newness of consciousness force into an expression and manifestation of a new world and a new experience, a new human in, mind, literally a new world. No? And it all starts only here in my own mind and in my own consciousness, and how I'm willing to literally read where I can give and find opportunities for giving instead of holding back or instead of trying to protect the little that I think I have. And that's where the consciousness just shrinks and everything becomes very, very sacrificial. And that is really where the mind gets into conflict. And what you see as a conflict in the world right now is actually nothing else than living that out so that the mind can learn and that we have no use of this anymore, and we have all reason to give wholeheartedly and without limitations and without uh, any idea of loss or the need of bargaining. So just to look at a few sentences in that lesson 105, God, peace and joy are mine. We will fall across also in the third paragraph of this wonderful expression that God's gifts will never lessen when they are given away, they but increase thereby. This is what we're talking about. And further down, he expresses what that true action of mind of giving is. And he says, true giving is creation. True giving is creation. I said, extending the light, extending creative thought. It extends the limitless to the unlimited, eternity to timelessness, and love unto itself. To see already what is actually in itself whole, but maybe has still a meaning of something or of a limitation, is given to the unlimited, to the timelessness, unto itself, unto its wholeness. It adds to all that is completely complete already. It adds to all that is complete already, not in simple terms and adding more, for that implies that it was less before, and that would be again this thinking in small, in littleness. It adds by letting what cannot contain itself fulfill its aim of giving everything it has away, securing it forever for itself. That is a security, a promise, a guarantee, securing it forever for itself by the act of giving it away. And there's definitely nobody and nothing in the whole universe that will kind of uh, look at you. God is looking now how much money or how much things in the world you're giving away. There's no comparison, and there's nobody here to to do that job. It is really just you looking on yourself, right? And therefore Jesus comes from above and says, hey, what we truly give is God's peace and joy. We give the light thought, we give the love itself, the whole heart. That's what we really give. And you are asked to join into that society, you could call it, that is willing to give oneself, one whole self. And when we go to our original versions, to the beginning of the textbook of A Course in Miracles, and we were at the beginning in the edited version of chapter 3, at the very beginning and in the complete and annotated edition, which includes parts of the original urtext, or is the urtext version. We are at chapter 3 in the third section and continue with the third paragraph as we continue in the edited version in the first section of the same chapter with the second paragraph. And it is a little bit extended and more paragraphs and more expression in the original version. In that, we were sharing in that resurrecting experience of the last episode that the best defense, as always, is not to attack another's position, but rather to protect the truth, and therefore also to know that truth is true and nothing else is true, and to know that the truth cannot be eradicated by the ego or by any challenging thought form. It is really whole and one in itself, and it cannot be threatened what belongs to the truth. And so also those gifts of God that are the gifts of God given to the Son of God are in that sense completely safe, secure, one, whole. They cannot be threatened. They can be denied, but they are still there. And that is what we are supposed to know. And if we continue from this point of that expression, to protect the truth, but to protect it in a true way. He's not talking about how we should argue or discuss or ponder on the unbelievers so that they finally accept the truth of the scripture as we were doing it for hundreds of years. But it is really in a true sense of remembering that the truth is true and nothing else is true, and nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God, isn't it, as the introduction tells us. It is not necessary to consider anything acceptable if you have to turn a whole frame of reference around in order to justify it. This procedure is painful in its minor applications and generally tragic on a mass basis. So he talks here about, and he names it in the next sentence as persecution. That persecution is a frequent result justifying the terrible misperception that God himself persecuted his own Son on behalf of salvation. The very words are meaningless. Persecution, of course, we know that it's not just individually that Jesus has been persecuted and then crucified, but of course that has been transferred since the beginning of time to the peoples who appear to be different or do it in a different way or have a different approach, different rituals, different traditions, how to come together, how to celebrate their recognitions or their contact with God. And so it was, of course, with the Jewish community too, over those thousands of years suffering persecution. But you find the same right now in the world, in other nations and peoples, where persecution becomes a very thought that needs to be looked at and needs to be transformed. And if just even within society, you see lots of examples where women, Black people, many forms of persecution that come up now in that newness of our willingness to have that solved. Otherwise, it wouldn't even come up and would be covered up immediately. Obviously, we are now, as a human consciousness, ready to look at it and to transform it, and that's why it shows up. And so at the end, we should be grateful that it shows up and is no longer covered up so that we can make that personal transformative action and choose anew, literally choose anew. What are the gifts that we want to share? What are the things that we don't like of each other, and become willing to forgive those things within our own heart and soul and mind. Because what we see out there, of course, is just a reflection of our own thoughts. Okay, let's continue here. It has always been particularly difficult to overcome this, because although the error itself is no harder to overcome than any other error, men were unwilling to give it up because of its prominent escape value. In milder forms, a parent says, "This hurts me more than it hurts you," and feels exonerated in beating the child. Can you believe that the father really thinks this way? That would be a good question, because all these uh, Christian, or not just Christian, these religious establishments do not ask that question. They just live within their frame of ethics and morals. And if they would just once question really if the father really thinks that way, how values, Christian values, or any of any religious community values are propagated and defended and even made politics, it's like, it's, oh my God, I don't even want to go there, and I don't want to hear much of that, because it just shows that the mind is still deep asleep and needs awakening as as much as it needed it all through time. It is so essential that all such thinking be dispelled. Dispelled, he says, yeah? That we must be very sure that nothing of this kind remains in your mind, in our minds. I was not punished because you were bad. That is Jesus speaking, I was not punished because you were sinful, you could say. I was not crucified because of your sins. The holy benign lesson which the atonement teaches is wholly lost if it is tainted with this kind of distortion in any form. And here comes an expression of Romans, I think it's Romans 12. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord, is strictly a karmic viewpoint. It is a real misperception of truth by which man assigns his own evil past to God. The evil conscience from the past has nothing to do with God. Also, that was in the Bible, in the Old Testament, Hebrews, where he talks about this evil conscience, or where this message was given in the scriptures. From the past has nothing to do with God. He did not create it. God did not create it, and he does not maintain it. God does not believe in karmic retribution at all. His divine mind does not create that way. He does not hold the evil deeds of man even against himself. It is likely then that he would hold against any man the evil that another did. And here's the the answer to that question, very imminent and obvious, that of course this would be completely impossible, and it's not gonna happen that way. So be very sure that you recognize how impossible this assumption really is, and how entirely it arises from misprojection. This kind of error is responsible for a host of related fallacies, including the misbelief that God rejected man and forced him out of the Garden of Eden. So here we have another perspective how he uses the teaching that we share from the Bible. And this is just in the beginning of chapter 3 in the textbook. So the misbelief, right? Just hear that. It's very clearly stated. The misbelief that God rejected man and forced him out of the Garden of Eden, or that I am misdirecting you, that Jesus would misdirect you. I have made every effort to use words which are almost impossible to distort. But man is very inventive when it comes to twisting symbols around. Right? And then, in that sense, to want to have it, to want to hear what is decided, what someone says, that's how I want to understand it, and that's what I want to, how I want to hear it, and that's is the under quote this individual truth that is, of course, still just part of the ego and has nothing to do with truth. God Himself is not symbolic; He is fact. Again, God Himself is not symbolic; He is fact. The atonement too is totally without symbolism. It is perfectly clear because it exists in light. Only man attempts to shroud it in darkness, to shroud it in darkness, have made it inaccessible to the unwilling and ambiguous to the partly willing. The atonement itself radiates nothing but the truth. It therefore epitomizes harmlessness and sheds only blessing. It could not do this if it arose from anything other than perfect innocence. What expression, isn't it? Like all what we understood of making ourselves part of the atonement, and these self sacrifices, and what penance and all those things. And here it's clearly stated that all that is shared is blessing, is the truth, is perfect innocence from where it comes from. Innocence is wisdom because it is unaware of evil. It's unaware of the ego, right? Which doesn't exist. It is, however, perfectly aware of everything that is true. And I'm gonna leave it with the next few sentences because that's a nice, wonderful wrap up. The resurrection demonstrates that nothing can destroy truth. That is demonstrated by your resurrecting experience, brother, that nothing can destroy the truth. As I said, it still remains there as the gift of God. They still remain there. They are accessible for all times. That is truth is eternal, that cannot be eradicated by any means of the ego. Nothing can destroy truth. Good can withstand any form of evil because light abolishes all forms of darkness. Light abolishes all forms of darkness. The atonement is thus the perfect lesson. It is the final demonstration that all of the other lessons which I taught are true. The atonement is the perfect lesson. Just remember that. And that's why we accept atonement for ourselves. It is the corrective procedure, it is the acceptance of correction of our mind. It is the gateway to see everything in that new light. We are here to make ourselves part of that atonement principle, because otherwise it becomes a defense of the truth on a conceptual level with a self identity. And of course, it is not that. Of course, it would be a trap, and the mind would need to open up again and again, undergo its transformation and its correction. It is the final demonstration that all of the other lessons which I taught are true. Those are the expressions of Jesus using here the original version of the urtext, or even going back to the notes as Helen Schuckman was receiving it by the mind of Jesus Christ. And I want to finish up today, I keep it a little shorter, with something from the 3 days to awakening in the day 1, looking for a way out of here, which relates to this acknowledging the true gifts and that action of giving what we have truly received. I'm reading here from page 114 out of the 3rd chapter. To know yourself as being undone and to be in that certainty that you already have this gift of God, you simply remember that it is happening now as you give what you have received, as you give yourself, self-capitalized, as you give yourself away. Remember, you can only give to yourself, and what you give away is what you truly have. Ask God for help, and you will be heard. There is only one singular reality, one creative mind, and that is you. And guess what? You are already living in the resurrection. There is no need anymore to imagine yourself as separate from God, as a part of the world you see with your body's eyes. There is no need. All that is needed is your decision to live this dream you call, under quotes, life. The split in your mind was your making of time, yet the occurrence was yet for an instant and was simultaneously corrected. It never happened in truth. Anyway, thoughts thought, words spoken, and acts performed are always just pointing to that source, the only truth. They never existed in truth as separate or multiple expressions of divinity. There is but one God, one creative power, and that power is given to you by His creative thought because you are as God created you. You are truly the Son of God and have never left your Father. And that's how we join into, as we were just hearing it, God is not as is not the concept. God is not a symbol. God is a fact. God is not symbolic. God is a fact. And with that, my dear brothers, I just leave it with a moment of quietness, of joining in that light remembrance of what has been given us, what we experience as the gifts of God, as that joy, as that love, as that happiness at the core of our being, and what we share every moment, what we extend very naturally by simply letting go the limitations of thoughts of giving or what could be given. And it is in the quietness of our heart that we know it for sure and remember it. So let's just join for a few minutes in that silence and quietness and peace. I love you with all my heart, and thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Blessings. Have a most wonderful day wherever you are. See you out there. Bye bye.